Welcome back to Cult Pop. I'm your host, Jim Hall, and we're at the 2012 Confusion in Troy, Michigan, great science fiction convention. We're running into a lot of old friends, and one that I just absolutely love is Tobias Buckell. And Tobias has been on the show numerous times. I just absolutely love his Crystal Rain universe and all that wonderful stuff, and he's always a great guest, a lot of fun things to talk about. And Tobias has made time to be with us again today. Thanks, Tobias.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show.
You've got a lot of new stuff out since I've had you on the past. In the past, we've got the Arctic Rising is going to be out as soon as people see this.
Sure.
That's going to be out. You've got a short story collection, and you've got some interesting things going on with publishing and with your website and stuff. So we've got a lot to talk about. Let's jump right in with your new novel, Arctic Rising.
Sure. Arctic Rising is sort of a near-future techno-thriller. We're headed off in a new direction and taking a look at what happens when the North Polar ice cap is finished, completed melting. There's a fascinating kind of like resource rush going on already for the ability to claim rights to both ship over the north of Canada, because then you don't have to pay the Panama Canal fees, and to create deep water harbors in North Canada, and to also go ahead and get the ability to claim rights for the resources that are underneath the ice right now. So a lot of very large oil and gas companies have been already securing the rights to
drill and mine and stuff,
and everything in those areas. And it's very interesting. I started reading some declassified studies that the Navy's doing, because the Navy gets very concerned about how you add a seventh ocean, basically, to your naval fleet operations.
How do you secure these areas?
How do you secure these areas? And it just was very fascinating to read these military futurist studies, because what is futurist study? It's basically science fiction in some ways, you know?
They're contemplating what might be going on.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I think with this that'll really hit fans, is that you're known with the Crystal Rain. We had many discussions on the show as the things progressed, how much you really look into science background, and you really do your research. So I really know with this that you're really getting into it and knowing that there's many different ways that this can go. And this has been a big news topic for 5 to 7 years. 7 years ago, they were more starting to worry, and then the past couple of years, it kind of came to my attention because of having discussions with you.
Yeah.
And then you start to see things that you might not normally notice. And I've seen some of the stuff going on in different countries fighting to determine who's going to, land their flag.
Who owns the rights to what's under the ice.
All right. So now is Arctic Rising something that will just be a standalone, or is this something that you want to get into and this what do we call that, near science fiction?
Near future, techno-thriller, that sort of thing, yeah.
And is this something that you're going to want to continue, or was it a one-shot?
It is kind of a one-shot, but I'd like to explore this. I've been doing a lot of short fiction that explores near-future concerns, geopolitics, resources, that sort of thing. And it fascinates me because I have a sort of nuanced look, which is that hair shirt environmentalism, the doom and gloom, doesn't really play well for me, because we're a very inventive species. However, it is quite clear that there's a very large problem looming that we're going to be going through. And so where there's conflict, there's great storytelling. That's the fundamental basis, the fundamental unit of storytelling and high adventure is conflict. And the effects of global warming create massive conflict. And so I just wanted to sort of use it as a backdrop. And I think a lot of people make the mistake that science fiction is predictive, and I think it's not so much predictive as extrapolative. And you sort of extrapolate what you see and trends and concerns. It's one of those things where, maybe in 10 years we decide to solve the problem somehow of global warming. We get together and reduce our use of oil, in which case, me talking about a future that deals with these problems becomes moot. But on the other hand, it's still important to, in a fictional context, idea to grasp and toy and play with and tease apart the ramifications and implications of what we are being told by scientists is going on. One of those being, all the projections show that by 2040 or so now, it looks like we'll have ice-free summers. And that changes the way in which we ship, the way in which we get resources. One of the funny things is that there is actually a lot of oil trapped underneath the ice up there. So one of the side benefits of the ice melting is that we actually extend the ability for us to use lots of oil,
Right.
Which is one of those very funny,
And this is part of the battle of who can claim that, who can claim
exactly
that oil for theirs.
who gets to claim it. And so it just, it's a great place to play around with and set a novel in.
Well, now we've talked a little bit about the backdrop of the science and the political going on with Arctic Rising. Tell us a little bit, as much as you can without giving away too
Sure.
much. Tell us about the characters and the protagonists that take this book along.
Sure. Annika Duncan is a United Nations Polar Guard airship pilot, and she's been assigned to the North, and her job is a radioactive spotter. She flies around and looks for ships that are emitting radioactive sources because nuclear dumping is a big problem in the future. We already have this interesting thing that happens nowadays where someone created a map of all the industrial ships that have mysteriously and accidentally sunk in deep water around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that were carrying industrial waste. And there's a pretty good, just using these maps and extrapolating from the raw data, there seems to be an indication that a lot of companies that get rid of their industrial waste, not on purpose, but are outsourcing the getting rid of this waste, are ending up having it show up on a ship which accidentally sinks out in deep water rather than being properly disposed of, because then you can get that contract for such massive amounts of money to dispose of this dangerous waste, and then you can cheaply get rid of it by sinking it in a deep part of the ocean. And this person who built a map showed that there are some scatter plots of increased density of accidental sinkings of these ships that were carrying industrial waste in the Mediterranean and in other parts of the ocean. It's just not coincidence.
Right, it's all in this Pacific area. It's the deepest part of the ocean.
Exactly. So these ships are going down to the deepest area, so they're just basically probably being scuttled. And when these tsunamis happened on the East African coast, a lot of industrial waste was washed up onto the beaches. And so her job is basically to try and prevent the scuttling of ships in the Arctic. That's her, that's what the United Nations Polar Guard does. And what she accidentally discovers is not nuclear waste, but a nuclear bomb being transported into the Arctic. And so her job then, she gets shot out of the sky, and her job, once she survives that, is to hunt down why she was shot out of the sky and why there's a nuke being shuttled around the polar north. Is it environmental activists trying to destroy an oil rig? Is it terrorists? Is it something else? Is the CIA involved in something?
So you've got multiple levels, mystery, action, everything going. So good.
Exactly.
Good. And this is definitely. You've talked before in the past when you've been on our show how you wanted to go in this direction. So I'm so thrilled that you've actually done this, and I'm definitely thinking that this is something we hope you return to this type of universe, because especially with as much as you do research and talking about like the polar ice caps and all that, the ramifications of what goes on in the around the world, Italy and different places have so much about the rising water levels. There's just a lot that can be done with that. So I definitely hope you decide to return.
It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Now, this has been 2 years since we've had you on.
Yeah.
So this came out. You've done some different things that I want to talk about, but something that's come out semi-recently that I want to skip on to now and talk a little bit about is kind of what we've just discussed off camera, a failed projects book, if you will. And it's you said it's for fans, great, fans and collection freaks that want to have everything you've done. And I'm one of those. I like having authors. You like to get everything. But you also mentioned how it's kind of a teaching tool because there's notes about why maybe this didn't get published, why this didn't work.
Sure, it's a short story collection called Nascence, and the idea is that when I started to become a writer, I wrote a lot of short stories, and to date I've written about 150 short stories, and I've published almost 50 of them. There are 100 of them that haven't sold, and people often will come to me and say, "Hey, why don't you revise some of those 100 and sell them?" And every once in a while, an editor will come and ask me, like, "Can we take a look at some of those?" We call them trunk stories because they're in a trunk. And my response is that these were early experiments that failed and are very broken, and it would be easier for me just to write a whole new story that works. But that doesn't mean there isn't some value in them, or that they're not, in some cases, mildly fun to read. So the idea was that I would take one from each year as I was developing as a writer and put them together in an anthology and talk about why the story failed and put it up for sale. And that's what I have right now. The short story collection is called Nascence, and it's 16 or 17 stories, and each one has a couple page intro that talks about where I was in my career, how the story doesn't work, all the mistakes I made, and how I learned from that story and how it failed. And one of the last stories, I include 3 versions of it. The first try I made of it, the second try, and the third try that then sold over a multiple year period. And so it works really well as a guide on how to write. It's kind of one of my, answers to how do you learn how to write.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a perfect teaching tool for a college level writing course where you're learning as you go that, okay, I've written something, well, maybe not. It sounds like that's perfect tool for a professor somewhere to use that. Now, what kind of feedback are you getting? Are you getting that type of feedback from writers? I assume a lot of writers are really intrigued by this, or potential writers, people trying to get a career going.
Yeah, people who are potential writers are hooked onto it. They found it really interesting because a lot of people give advice that says show don't tell or things like that. But in this, I'd give you a story that doesn't work and say, here are the mistakes in it, and even in one case, here are the mistakes and here's how I fixed them. And I think that's really valuable to see, exactly how a story is failing, and that really kind of, in some cases, can help.
If I may, can I ask you, what do you think, just in general, with a lot of short stories, what is a common failure? What is something that knocks down, not necessarily just yours, but to help writers, what would you say is a common failure in short stories that people often return? You say, well, this is why this isn't working, and in short stories.
In short stories, it's a failure to get off the ground really quickly, taking too long to bring in the ideas of the story and give them to the reader. What's cool about the story? It's getting to that conflict right away.
Okay.
Developing showing both a piece of your character, the conflict, and the general problems that they're going to face as soon as possible is the most common problem I see.
And that's actually, I was going to bring that up because I really either love short story collections and short stories, or sometimes it's just, if it's not a short story, I want to be going by page 3, full guns going. I want to know what's going on. Let's get this going and be full tilt. So I'm interested that you said that, and that's what you think a lot of the failings are. That's very interesting. And then you mentioned, I didn't realize even how many short stories have you written?
150.
And you've had how many published out
50.
of that? Wow, because I know you've had some of the most, when we email and talk, I've got a short story, this like the most random magazines, and cool. So when you had your short story collection, the Tides one, I thought that was really neat because you did bring a lot of these
collect them all together. Yeah,
that was very, very cool, and that is a nice. Why don't you give that a plug too? Because that's actually a really cool collection.
Tides from the New Worlds is a short story collection of, I think, probably 19 of my short stories from the first half of my career, all gathered together, and that's available online. And there's also a limited edition from Worm Publishing, Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles.
The
online
limited collection's beautiful. That's a really nice collection.
Worm Publishing did a really great job with that. So it's with short stories, you publish them all over the place. So sometimes it's nice to just bring them all together and put them into one book. And with Nascence, it was just interesting to take some of those failed, I picked 17 of those 100 that failed, and from, the very beginning to the very end, and kind of showed, the evolution of my craft and also the evolution of all the different mistakes I make.
Now, I find it interesting what you said about the fact that other than this collection you've just done, it's easier to just start over as opposed to say, hey, let's try to...
For me, it is. Every writer has a different way of approaching this stuff. There's a really great writer, his name is Charlie Finley, C.C. Finley is his pen name now, and we were once comparing the fact that at the time both both had 35 or so short stories published and a couple of novels. And we were comparing notes once. And I found out that he had written 35 short stories and published 35 stories. He sticks with the revision until he gets the story perfect, and then he sells it. And I tended to write a story, and if it would fail, I would just shelve it and then write another story. And then if it failed, I would shelve it and then write another one. And eventually, I started getting better and better and better. So I'm to the point now where I don't often have a failed short story. Most of them now, if I write it, I sell it. I've hit a good point. But that prototyping was important for me. And even though we'd spent the same number of years and probably the same number of hours, it was interesting that two very totally different methods ended with us having roughly the same number of stories.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to discuss, as we talked off air here, off camera, I'm a huge, huge fan of your Crystal Rain universe, and it's how we got to meet about 7 years ago now, going back. Absolutely love the stuff. And you've got some really interesting developments in how, because there's a lot of fans like myself that want to continue to read some stories, want to see more of Pepper, want to see more of the universe. And we've had you on before, and you talked about the fact that maybe there's only a specific smaller market for those books. You had so many more ideas that you wanted to get into, and that you may come back to that universe. And you've decided that there is a way that you can come back to that universe, and you've been writing about it on the website. So I thought this would be a good time for you to maybe talk a little bit about that and let your fans know about that.
Sure. What we did was we crowdsourced the funding of it. And by crowdsourcing, I mean we use a service called Kickstarter that lets you put up a project page on a website where you say, we need a certain amount of funding for this project. In my case, I said, $10,000 for me to be able to quit doing some freelance work and spend 6 months focusing on this book. And if we don't have enough people get together and chip in enough to raise 10 grand to go ahead and write this book, then no one will get their credit card charged. It'll just not happen. I figured that way, the number one question I'd always get was like, when are you going to write another Crystal Rain book, And I thought this way, at least I could answer that question. Like, we just don't have enough fan demand. But I suspected, given the fact that sales were slowly rising with each book, before we decided to go in this new direction for Arctic Rising, that maybe there was some demand there. So that's why I did the Kickstarter project. And basically, it's kind of like pre-ordering the book. You can buy an electronic copy only for a certain amount, or hardcover, signed hardcover, or you can do a live read-along where you can get to read it as I write it.
Right. I think that's a really unique idea.
And we had some bonuses where you could have like a character named after you, or a starship or named after you. And so people bought different packages and pre-ordered the book, and we got $11,600 and some dollars in pre-orders. Which means that, yes, there is demand for the novel. And not only do we have all those pre-orders, but like once I write it, then we can put it up for sale on Amazon Kindle, and I can create physical copies to sell at events like this convention. So it became financially viable to sort of do this direct version of the book to fans who are very excited about it. So it's welcome to the future. There's all sorts of things you can do. I'm doing Arctic Rising with my New York publisher. I'm doing this direct crowdsourced funding model with a continuation of the series. I'm working with a medium-sized press for some other things.
Right, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You've always been something I really like about you. Think outside the box, you got a lot of things going, and that's a great way to continue to get stuff, have other streams of income for you, continue with other projects, but still have a fan favorite continue out there. I think that's really cool.
Win-win-win.
So maybe by 2013 or something, we could expect something, huh? Or
well,
maybe even sooner than that, possibly?
Sooner. I mean, we're going to finish up this. The book is called The Apocalypse Ocean, the fourth book in the series, and it'll be done probably June or July-ish.
Oh, I didn't realize. So
so this year I'll have 2 books out. I'll have Arctic Rising is coming out in February 28th, and then sometime in June or July I'll continue with this sequel to Crystal Rain, Ragamuffin, Sly Mongoose.
Fantastic. Well, that's definitely good news. Something I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is that I've talked about Subterranean Press with many other guests, and since we've had you on, you did a really cool kind of a team up for Subterranean Press. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, Paolo Bacigalupi, great writer and a good friend of mine, and we've had this opportunity to write paired novellas for Audible.com, which is the audiobook company. And they had asked me if I'd be interested in writing a novella for them that they could turn into an audiobook with another writer. And I mentioned it to Paolo one day when we were driving to a workshop, and I asked him, hey, do you want to get in on this? You know, we could do like a shared, you know, universe and each write a novella in this world. And he was down with that. So we took some time and we did that. Had a lot of fun, created neither of us had done fantasy novels before, or much in the way, even in short fiction. So we thought this would be great to write a fantasy novella, both of us. And we created this world and set out to write in it. And the Audible version did really well. And so then we had the print rights still. So then we approached Subterranean about doing the print version. And they did a gorgeous,
that
gorgeous
was really
edition.
cool.
Yeah, just beautiful book. Both, they did a version for my story, The Executionist, and they did a version for his story, The Alchemist. And you can buy either one or both.
Or pair them up with the numbers. Yeah, you can have the same. That's kind of a neat.
But they're just gorgeous artifacts. The books are just amazing, and just a lot of fun to have done that project.
Now, is that something you'd like to return to that world and to fantasy in general? Is that something you'd
the
like
world
to
we
write again?
created in that is an interesting one, and I would definitely like to return to it. And we had a lot of good positive mail.
I was going to say you got great incredible reviews
yeah.
and great feedback online and at your website and
Yeah.
you know, at Amazon and all kinds of places. Just
Yeah, it was
really
a very
nice
positive
things.
experience. I'd like to do it with Paolo again, and I definitely, you know, would like to return to the world. So, you know, we'll see. I wrote a short story in the world called The Fall of Alakan, which is available on Subterranean magazine, and that was sort of set in the same universe as the novellas, and
Yeah.
I would like to return to it again.
Yeah, Subterranean magazine is really nice for those of you that don't know. Go online, check out Subterranean Press, and
Yeah.
incredible, just all kinds, dozens and dozens of free stories available.
Yeah.
There, and that's really neat. And I'd like to see you do more stuff. I'm hoping maybe down the road,
Yeah.
maybe the Crystal Rain universe can get some stories at that publisher too for some special collections.
Sure.
One other thing I've been meaning to ask you, and just because I love your writing so much, and I'll anything you've got out to sell, I'm going to read. Is there, and so now we've talked about, you've done fantasy, you've done this near science fiction, or this
Yeah.
new, you've almost kind of created your own genre with Crystal Rain. You kind of,
Yeah.
you know, is there anything, do you want to write historical fiction? Do you want to write horror stories? Is there anything that's really gnawing at you? Because when we had you on at the past, you talked about the fact that you had a lot of near science going up, that you had
Sure.
a lot of real science, hard-based science stuff that you could write about.
Yeah.
Is there anything, you know, just bugging your mind right now that in the next few years you'd like to start hammering away at?
You know, I'm working on another novel for Tor called The Infringement, and that's pretty much got all my attention. That and the next Crystal Rain universe book. Beyond that, you know, I have some plans for some young adult novels,
Oh,
and
excellent.
those are what I'm working on in the back of my head, trying to sort of move into that genre as well.
Well, it's incredible. I've had some writers on from that market, and it's, if you can tap into that market, it's amazing, because a bestseller in that market might be 4 or 5, you know, the kids grab onto it, and
Sure.
they're also, you're helping keep writing and reading alive. If we get more kids reading, then hopefully they become the science fiction readers of.
And also,
20
I
years
love
from now.
science fiction, so there are not enough science fiction books in the young adult market.
Exactly.
By my estimation. So I'd love to help solve that problem.
Yes. Well, I wish you success with that. Tobias, we got a couple minutes left. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about your website.
Sure.
And then if there's anything else you want to plug or you know, let us know about, then
Sure.
now's your time.
Well, I mean, there's
Yeah.
always www.tobiasbuckell.com, and I keep a blog there, talk about, you know, upcoming technology, things that interest me, anything that's shiny.
Yeah,
you know.
you've got a very cool website. I've
Thanks,
always liked your
thanks.
website, and I like the fact a lot of stuff that I'm, you know, not hip to, you write about just things that are intriguing, and then I'll go, and I'm sure I know a lot of your fans do this.
Yeah.
Go learn more about, hey, check out this link.
Right.
Go read more yourself. And
Yeah.
a lot of the science stuff I really enjoy with that.
It's fun, and just stuff that's intriguing. You know, it's a lot of people are always sort of taken aback by science, or it's too hard, or that's what they seem to think. But you know, there's so much really good writing out there that kind of makes stuff interesting, lets you access it easily.
And you've got your web blog on there, so there's
Yep.
also videos available. We'll send you this so you can put clips of this on if you want. And then don't you also have, you always used to have free
There's
fiction?
still always free
yeah.
fiction, yeah. You know, it's I operate under the bet you just can't read one theory of literature. It's I do have lots of links to free short stories so that you can get a taste of what my writing is like and see if you're interested in reading more. So I try to keep it interesting, keep it updated, and keep lots of stuff happening at the website.
Excellent. And for fans of yours, this show, obviously at the website, they see fans all over the country and the world. Well, you're going to be all over the country this year on tour for Arctic
Yeah, I'll
Rising.
be doing a West Coast tour for Arctic Rising. So I'll be in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, San Diego. I
Excellent.
think.
And all those dates, it's right on the website.
It should be right on my website, yeah.
And you got a minute or two left. Is there anything else you want to plug for us? Or is there anything else we need to know about all things Tobias Buckell? How are the twins doing?
I think we covered it well. Yeah, I have two twin girls, and they're doing wonderfully. Yes, they keep me quite entertained, and they're quite lateral thinkers, so I like it.
Well,
parenthood has been good for me.
I'm delighted to see that as soon as I saw you, you had a smile on your face. You look fantastic.
Thank you.
And I'm glad to see the kids must be running you around just enough to make you happy and and healthy. So that's fantastic. Tobias, I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
I sincerely, absolutely just love your writing. We're big fans of your stuff here, so I'm glad you took the time. I like to get the word out about your stuff. So thanks for being on the show, and maybe at PenguinCon or next year at one of the shows, we'll have you on again and talk some more.
Totally.
Okay, great. That was Tobias Buckell. I'm just an absolutely big fan of his. You folks have heard me talk ad nauseum about what a great writer he is and how you got to pick his stuff up. You can go look back at previous shows he's been on by visiting our website, www.cultpop.com, or check out Tobias's website, read some of his novels right there. He's got a third of a few of his books, and like Tobias said earlier in the show, once you start reading, you're probably going to want to go pick them up. So I really think you should. That's it for today's show. We thank you so much for watching, and we hope you visit the website, check out some past shows, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.